Oh, we're live now. This is supposed to be. We'll see for how long, because, like I said, the internet is poopy here. I'm even wondering if it's, worth streaming, or if I should just record it like I do with putt stuff. Because it's not going to be clean, I don't think.
It's up to you. I mean, we only have a couple weeks anyway, and I don't know what our live viewership normally is, but I never see anything happening in the chat. So.
Pretty low. I think I'm gonna just record because I'm already dropping frames. It's just I know it's gonna be rough. Well, I mean, screw it. We're already doing it. Keep it up. We'll go.
We're already here. What's up, guys?
Yeah.
What's up, everybody?
Already doing it. Okay.
I don't want to look at myself anymore.
I don't blame you. I don't want to look at you either.
Dang. I can't swear on this podcast either. That's upsetting.
All right. Are we ready to roll?
I am ready whenever you are.
All right. Let's do it. To it. What's going on, everybody? One more week of the regular season, and boy, oh boy, is it going to be a meaningful week. We got some tie-breaking scenarios that, listen, it's going to get a little crazy, but fantastic week 9. Every single game, except for one, was quite close. Great weekend of football. Welcome back to another episode of Booth Review, the XFL edition. As always, I am your host, Devin Primrose, joined by the Sultan of Spice himself, Mr. Peter Strauss. What's going on, man?
Not much. Yeah, definitely a lot of close football this week. And if you're wondering, did I miss the week 9 preview? No, you didn't. We didn't do one. It was a crazy week.
It's definitely
a crazy time.
Definitely a crazy week.
Devin was packing up. He moved more stuff into my garage here. If I turned my camera around, you would see a whole bunch of
junk.
Stuff.
Whole bunch of junk. Yeah. That's what it is.
Whole bunch of junk and a couple dogs sleeping on the floor, and that's about it. But no, it was good. I had a good time. Did pretty well at a disc golf tournament, but we'll get into that on our other podcast. This podcast about football.
You didn't do so well the day after the disc golf tournament.
I was tired. Okay.
Listen, whatever excuse you want to keep giving me for continuing to lose to me, that's fine by me. Interesting week last week though. Very busy week for me. Had a lot going on. Interesting weekend. Weekend was crazy. Not entirely how I anticipated it going, but I was out there. Had a good time, nonetheless. Had fun, and beat you in disc golf, which is always fun. So, yeah.
Well, we'll be playing a lot of disc golf together soon, and eventually you have to just have a bad round. So,
see, you say that, but I keep getting better, man. Oh, doggies. Well, let's get into some football talk. I say we jump right into our best of the booth. And you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
I want you to go first because every time I go first, you're like, "Oh, well, we got to do it out of whack now because your best of the booth is actually my under review."
I feel like that's happened once. That does not count as every time when
It
it's
happened
happened
2 weeks
once.
in a row. 2 weeks in a row, it happened.
All right. Well, my best of the booth. It's an easy one. It's a short one. I'm giving it to a pair of 300-yard performances. There was two quarterbacks this week that broke the 300-yard mark. And that's kind of a significant mark. So I'm going to give it to both of them. Quarterback number one was Luis Perez for the Arlington Renegades. Kept it close. I believe they lost in overtime. But he went 31 of 41, which is just over 75% for 335 yards, one touchdown, and one pick. Solid performance from him. It was a game in which the Renegades needed to win, and they came up just short. So we'll see what happens going into Week 10. But good for Luis Perez. And the other one was another must-win game, and it was Jack Cohn of the San Antonio Brahmas. He's back to having a solid game. 25 of 31, which is just over 80%, 302 yards, one touchdown, no turnovers. So good on you, Jack Cohn, helping your team get a win to keep your season alive. And now we're going to get crazy with the tiebreakers in Week 10 for the Renegades and the Brahmas to see which one plays in the South Championship against the Houston Roughnecks. So hats off to both those guys going out there, balling out. Again, one fell just short, and the other got the dub to keep their season alive. So, makes for good football in Week 10. I'm here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I did not realize Luis Perez went over to the Renegades until I was watching the highlights this week, and I was like, "Oh, that seems like mostly what they were missing was a quarterback, and now they have a competent one." So,
yeah, could be interesting seeing them up against the potentially up against the Roughnecks in the South Championship. Could be pretty spicy.
it could be, and we'll definitely get back to that. Although right now I'm not a fan of you because texted you before we started. I have two people that I'm kind of thinking between.
Did I take both of them?
You did take both of
I
them.
thought, okay, so in my defense, I thought for sure you were going to go with one other guy, which now you get the opportunity to do so. Now, I don't know if you know who the other guy is, but I will tell you if you want me to.
Who did you think I was going to go with?
Of course, the Nooch, man. Ben DiNucci, like getting a huge victory for his team, the Seattle Sea Dragons.
The Nooch did have a good game, but then there were two quarterbacks that had 300-yard games.
Yeah, I took both of them.
Honestly, it's hard to pick like one player on the Sea Dragons this week. Like both sides of the ball, they just played super well. The front of the defense specifically, whoever like the Sea Dragons defensive line preventing AJ McCarron from being able to scramble. That's what, you know what? Screw it. This is my best of the booth. Sea Dragons defensive line. They had
That's
4
fair.
total sacks for 15 yards and 6 tackles for losses. So 10 plays keeping them behind the line of scrimmage. Kept AJ McCarron down to 1 rushing yard. They were just able to stop that run game. Battlehawks only had 12 carries for 54 yards total. They were just able to shut him down in a game that was basically for the second spot in the North. Like,
Yep.
And we'll get into the tiebreakers and stuff this week, but if both teams win, the odds are leaning in Seattle's favor.
Yep.
So yeah, shout out to that front seven. Ben DiNucci had a heck of a game. Shakir Pearson coming back again with 7 receptions for 115 yards and a touchdown. This team knew that they were in a must-win game, and they did not stop until the Battlehawks were buried in the ground.
Yeah. I assumed that you were going to talk about your team, man, because they had the performance of the weekend. They absolutely blew out St. Louis. Again, must-win game. Like, this is a game that I guess it technically wasn't a must-win, but it essentially was for that second spot in the North Championship. So, you would expect both teams to be out there fighting, and it looked like one team showed up to play, and the other team, never showed up at the stadium.
I would call it a must win only because if the Sea Dragons had lost, then I don't think they could have come back. Actually, I think they would have been eliminated
I think you might be right
because
about that. Yeah.
the first, we'll get into all of these later, but the first tiebreaker is head to head,
Hmm.
so they would have already lost that.
True.
Whereas
Yeah. Yeah.
now we can get a few tiebreakers deep.
Yeah.
But I'll get into all of the playoff scenarios right before our picks.
Okay. Cool.
Um, in the
Well,
meantime,
yeah. Who you got under
I
review?
under review, I'm going to stick with the Sea Dragons actually for this on the winning team because everybody on the Sea Dragons carried their weight except one guy who was in the NFL as early as last year.
Hmm.
Philip Lindsay
Hmm.
was like this huge thing coming back to the XFL. Everyone was super excited and he's had a couple touchdowns, but yards wise this week he had 10 carries for 17 yards. I'm trying to find his total yards for his couple games. It's hard because he's like down in the middle somewhere. Can I do it by like alphabetical?
I mean, it was a pretty bad performance. I know that it wasn't. It was very lackluster. Honestly, I don't think he's been spectacular since he came into the XFL.
Yeah,
Which,
everybody was super like he was in the
yeah,
NFL. I think
yeah.
halfway through the season and then got released.
I mean, I feel like
Um,
the thing that a lot of people need to realize with this league is that a lot of guys have NFL experience. A lot of them do.
yeah,
Philip Lindsay at a time was, I believe, the starter, but it's not like he was, a starter for an extended amount of time or a full season or anything like that. Like most of his time in the NFL was in a committee type role as a running back, and so I don't think he's necessarily any flashier of a player than any other guy that's in the XFL that has NFL experience. Um, the only guy, in my opinion, that whose name means something is Josh Gordon, and even then, Josh Gordon in the spring leagues has not been significant, but he was fantastic for a limited time in the NFL. So uh, that's the only guy that I would expect
yeah,
playing in the XFL to light it up. Which he's had some good games, and he's also had some not so good games. But
yeah,
most of these guys all have NFL experience in some capacity. So what the beautiful thing about this league is that it gives guys that might not have had enough tape to get drafted or get signed as an undrafted free agent or anything like that to be able to potentially get a shot at the NFL. You got that aspect, and then you also got the aspect of there's a bunch of guys that fizzled out in the NFL, and they're looking for a second chance. And Philip Lindsay happens to be one of those guys, just like a handful of other guys across the league. So I didn't understand a lot of people making a big noise about him, but again, he is a
yeah.
recognizable NFL name, so it does make sense in some form.
I mean, as far as running backs go in the XFL, I would feel like he's probably the most well-known name. And his two
Yeah,
games with the Sea Dragons has had 18 carries for 40 yards, which is a 2.2 average.
yeah,
So not great. Leave it to the young guys. We got other guys running around the league doing super well. Another one didn't do quite well this week, but I feel like he might be your under review. So I'm gonna ask you who your under review is.
my under review is quarterback, keeping it with quarterbacks.
Okay.
And I feel like, given that information, you can probably guess who it was. Because, again, it was a must win game. If they had won the game, they'd be in the playoffs facing off against DC. But that is not the case because AJ McCarron did not have a good game. AJ McCarron, in arguably the biggest game of the year, kind of floundered out there. The Seattle defense really did a great job of shutting him down. But he went 18 of 32, which is 56%. Had 186 yards, one touchdown, two picks, and was sacked 4 times. So the defense really did their job putting pressure. Great coverage out there from the DBs, and McCarron just couldn't do anything. He was stifled all game long. And like I said, it looked like St. Louis didn't even show up to the stadium, and Seattle had been there all week with the way they played. So yeah, hats off to the Seattle defense, but AJ McCarron, dude, you got to do better,
Yeah.
especially in big games like this that mean something. So if St. Louis happens to sneak into the postseason to take on the DC Defenders, man, you got to play a lot better than that against that Defenders team to get the
Yeah.
job done.
And we saw this out of the Battlehawks the last time they played the Defenders. They played
Yeah,
them at home, and it seems weird. This is the second game at home where it just kind of felt like the Battlehawks weren't in it, and
which
I'm
is a
not sure
shame
why.
because they have the biggest crowd. They always have the biggest and
And
best
it's
crowd.
yeah, I can't believe that crowd as wasted as it is. I thought you were going to go with Abram Smith for your under review because he only had 10 carries for 27
That
yards.
would have been fair too, especially given
But
like the way he looked the first half of the season.
yeah, and I mean he's still leading and rushing and all that, I'm sure, but
Yeah,
he just had one pretty low week here. But yeah, the Battlehawks are making it more and more likely that the Sea Dragons are going to take that second spot that the Battlehawks have had all season long, unless they can get their crap together. And not only do they need to win this week, but they need to win big. And
yeah.
again, we'll get into tiebreakers in a minute, but there's your little hint at what they might need to do.
Well, do we have a legit or counterfeit this week?
Um, yeah, it's a simple one. It's a simple one.
We do.
Um, now that the Arlington Renegades have a quarterback, would you now consider them contenders?
Hmm. Um, I don't think they're. I don't think they're necessarily contenders for a title. Um, my gut right now would say that the XFL champion is coming out of the North. Whoever wins the North Championship will win the XFL championship. Um, and Houston, I think, is good enough to, if they can fix some things that have been looking rough over the last couple weeks, then I think they're good enough to where they could put up a fight in a championship. But man, I just don't see. I don't see the Renegades getting past Houston, and if they do, I definitely don't see them getting past whoever comes out of the North. So calling them legit contenders, I don't know if I can do that. I'm gonna say counterfeit.
Yeah. I think that they definitely have more of a chance now of beating Houston because even in Houston's
Yeah,
win
I mean, I'd agree. I would agree
over
with that.
even in Houston's win over Vegas this week, nobody had like a great like Brandon Silvers only threw for 100 yards and
Yeah,
had 2 picks, no touchdowns. Their running game was decent with Max Borghi, 10 carries, 74 yards and a touchdown.
yeah,
Um, their defense played solid, 4 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. Um, but yeah, Houston's even though they've won the last 2 weeks, are back on a winning streak. Just again, are against bad teams, and
yeah,
now that Arlington has made corrections and Houston has not. And to me, that makes me think that Arlington has a real shot of at least getting to the finals. I
yeah,
don't think they're better than any of the North teams that are vying for a playoff spot right now, but
yeah, yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you. Well, let's hit the power rankings real quick. Um, who you got in your eighth spot?
eighth spot, I moved the Vipers there. Um,
Ooh,
I don't have a real reason. Just watching highlights this week and the last couple weeks, like the Guardians have just been in it, man. Like even though they've lost the last 2 games, still like
yeah,
it's been dang close against good teams. So I couldn't feel like I could move it back down to the bottom. Whereas the Vipers just feel stagnant, like they're eliminated and they're just kind of being out there because they have to be.
I mean maybe, but you also had like Jalen McClendon also had like a very decent game this week for them in a meaningless game. So I don't know. I have the Guardians at eighth. I think you. I feel like I say this every week, but I feel like you could flip flop either the Guardians or the Vipers. I have the Vipers in seventh. I'm fine with either one of them being at the bottom. They're definitely the two worst teams in the league at this point, I would say. So yeah, Vipers, Guardians at eight, Vipers at seven.
Yeah. Um, that's where I have the Guardians is at
Yeah,
7.
yeah,
They're the two eliminated teams, so it makes sense. Like
yep,
power rankings are like who's gonna win the title, and obviously those two teams can't win the title.
exactly.
Um, so moving up to number 6, I have the San Antonio Brahmas. So still at the bottom of the contenders, but they looked very good this week and definitely can make it interesting. They have a toughest game of the season so far ahead of them this week, but if they win it, and the Renegades lose it, then they're pretty much in, I think. We'll
Yeah,
get to it in a minute with the tiebreakers, but I'm pretty sure that's how that works.
yeah. I also have the Brahmas at six. I I don't feel good about that team making a potential postseason run, or even making a run for the towards the South Championship. But maybe a couple things go their way. Maybe they can sneak in there through the tiebreaker scenarios. But yeah, I've got the Brahmas at sixth, and I have the Renegades at fifth. I think that's only natural. Those are the two remaining teams in the South outside of the Roughnecks who have already locked up their spot. So I just feel like the Renegades are the better of the two. So got them at five.
Yep. I also have the Renegades at 5, especially with the addition of Luis Perez. It kind of fixes
Yeah,
some things for them and gives them a real shot to make a run in the short playoffs that we have.
definitely.
So yeah, Brahms at 6, Renegades at 5. At number 4, also should be simple. I have the Roughnecks. Uh, they are clinched with home field advantage in the first round of the playoffs, but I don't think they're better than the 3 other teams in the North that are still fighting for spots. So, and they might not even be better than the Renegades, but they, I think, have lost both games to them. So, got to keep the Roughnecks ahead for now.
Yep, I've also got the Roughnecks at four. Again, they've locked up a playoff spot. None of the teams below them have. But I'm with you. I think the three teams in the North are all superior currently. The only one that's a little bit of a question mark is the Battlehawks, and I have the Battlehawks at three. So I'd be fine switching those two around, but I think Seattle and DC are clearly a step above Houston currently. So yeah, I've got the Roughnecks at four, Battlehawks at three. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I also have the Battlehawks at 3, especially since they lost to Seattle this week. It would be weird to, put them over them. Um, they need to get some heart. I don't know why some weeks it feels like they got it, and some weeks it feels like they don't.
yep,
But
yep,
this week they definitely didn't. They shouldn't have too difficult of a time this week, but they are playing again a Guardians team who's been very, very feisty for the past 3 weeks.
true. Yeah,
Um, so that's not a team that you can let your guard down on. I don't think at this point in the season.
yeah, I agree.
Um, Battlehawks at 3. As much as it hurts my heart, I do have the Sea Dragons at 2. Um, they did
It's the
lose.
right spot. It's the right spot for them.
They did lose to the Defenders. We didn't cover it, but they did lose to the Defenders, and the Defenders haven't lost again. So it makes sense for now. Again, we'll see what happens. Maybe the third time will be the charm for the Sea Dragons this year. But right now, I got them at number 2.
Yep, I've also got Seattle at two. Again, defenders in my mind are just a clear cut above everybody else. Seattle is close, and I'm hopeful that we get a Seattle DC North championship. To be honest, because I think those two are the best teams in the league, and so it would make for a great matchup in the postseason to have those two powerhouses go up against each other. But for now, DC. Listen, you're 8-1 on the season. You've lost one game, and you lost it by 1 point on a missed field goal. So I get that it was to the worst team in the league, but I'm not going to fault you too much for that when you've taken care of business in the other 8 games you've played, and presumably will take care of business in your next game in Week 10. So yeah, I've got to put DC at 1.
Yeah, that's where I got him too. Just continuing to be, even though they've had some close games and they lost to the Guardians and they had a close game with the Renegades this week, just they're still playing like crazy. Abram Smith had one down week. I doubt that will continue. Jordan Teamu and Derek King are still being super safe with the football,
Yeah.
not turning it over a lot. And at the end of the day, if you can defend the ball, then good chance you'll win. So,
Yep. For sure. For sure. All right, Pete. Let me hear these tie-breaking scenarios.
all right. So let's start with the easy things. Let's start about what we do know.
Okay.
DC Defenders clinched number 1 seed, home field advantage for the North Championship. Houston clinched number 1 seed, home field advantage for the South Championship. So that's what we know. And then the Vipers and the Guardians are both eliminated. They have no shots. They are done. Arlington clinches playoff spot with a win or a San Antonio loss.
Okay.
San Antonio clinches playoff spot with a win and an Arlington loss.
Yeah.
And that is because if we go down the tiebreaker list here, first tiebreaker is head-to-head, which San Antonio and Arlington are 1-1 against each other. Tiebreaker 2 is win-loss percentage in divisional games. Going into this week, San Antonio is 3-3 against divisional opponents, while Arlington is 3-2. So San Antonio doesn't play a divisional opponent. They are locked in at 3-3. If Arlington loses, they will also be at 3-3. So then we have to move on to tiebreaker number 3, which is strength of victory in all games. So the amount of wins that the teams they've played against have.
Right.
Going into this week, Arlington, the strength of victory is 6. Their opponents have won 6 games. San Antonio has 5. But if San Antonio beats DC, that'll shoot up by 8. They'll win that tiebreaker.
Okay.
So that is the situation in the South. 3 tiebreakers down.
Wow.
Out of 8.
But that's only if Arlington loses. As long as Arlington wins, none of that matters.
Arlington is winning in. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
But they are playing who are they playing?
I mean, so what's crazy is like the 4 teams that are really looking at playoff contention. So the Renegades have to play the Roughnecks. That's the only matchup that's like actual good teams playing each other. The other 3 games are all like, this should be an easy win. But one of those teams is the Brahmas facing the Defenders, which we assume DC's going to, beat the brakes off of them.
Well, DC might rest people.
They might, and San Antonio has to win that game. So you would think San Antonio would be fired up. You're in the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, so it's possible. And the Renegades presumably will lose to the Roughnecks, which means that if that happens and the Brahmas take care of business on Saturday against DC, then it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting time with tiebreakers.
Because that will be because that game happens first, San Antonio and DC. So if San Antonio wins, Arlington knows the next day they got to come out swinging.
Right. If San Antonio loses, then nothing matters, and Arlington is already in.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the less interesting of our 2 scenarios because
yes,
with the North,
we want chaos.
With the North, it gets a little deeper. So we're talking about tiebreakers head to head, they're 1-1. Check mark 1. Win-loss percentage in the division. Seattle going into this week are 2-3. St. Louis going into this week are 3-3. If both teams win, they'll both be at 3-3. So check that off. Like, obviously, if one team wins and one team loses, whichever team wins is getting in. So, like, if Seattle wins, St. Louis loses. I'm doing these scenarios based on if both teams win.
Okay.
Because that's the only way any of this would work.
And, like, it makes sense, too, because they're playing the two worst teams in the league.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Orlando's been a little feisty, but we'll see.
They're still one of the two worst teams in the league, though.
Strength of victory. Fun facts. Seattle and St. Louis have beaten all of the same opponents so far this year, except St. Louis has not yet beaten the Guardians. Okay. So if St. Louis beats the Guardians, their strength of victory is exactly the same. So this is where it starts to lean into Seattle's favor, because the fourth tiebreaker, and there's not exact numbers for where they're ranked in this, but it is best combined ranking among division teams in points scored and points allowed in all games. Okay. So, like, I'm assuming it'd be the lowest, like if you're first in points allowed and first in points for,
yeah,
you would just combine that and it'd be 2. Okay. The exact rankings of this are not available. I cannot find a way to stat them. What I can see, at least for offense, is the total amount of points scored on offense based on touchdowns and try after conversions.
Okay.
So for offense, Seattle, their offense is putting up 19 points per game.
Right.
St. Louis is putting up 17.67 points per game. And if my math is right, that makes Seattle second in the division and St. Louis third in the division. Points allowed, I couldn't really find that, so I just had to take the total points that were scored. I know that might be a little weird because some of them were probably like defensive scores. But Seattle allows 18.67 points a game, and St. Louis allows 19.33 points a game. So Seattle is just ahead in both of those categories.
Okay, so this
is where it leads.
So I just found this. This might help us out more. So the fourth tiebreaker, assuming St. Louis and Seattle both win, St. Louis would need to score 19 more points versus Orlando than St. Louis needs to score 19 more points versus Orlando than Seattle scores against Vegas. And St. Louis must still rank first in total points against to win tiebreaker 4, which seems complicated as hell.
Yeah. Because fourth tiebreaker is ranking among divisions. Fifth tiebreaker is ranking amongst all teams, which shouldn't change that much because they're in the same division anyway.
Yeah.
But this is kind of, like I said, how it starts to lean in Seattle's favor, because Seattle's a bit ahead of them in these last categories. Because 6th is net points in all games.
Yeah.
7th is net touchdowns in all games. And then if they get 8 tiebreakers deep, they give up and flip a coin. I don't know what kind of shenanigans have to happen for this to line up perfectly to get to a coin toss. But I kind of hope it happens. Because that would be hilarious.
Yeah, I agree. That's crazy how much it's coming down to.
Yeah. Which, I mean, in a league where you're not playing as many teams, like, it makes sense. Like, because, like, they're only getting past strength of victory because they can only play so many teams.
Yeah.
And they just happen to beat all the same ones, and neither of them beat the defenders.
True.
Anybody who beat the defenders has a, huge boost in that.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense. All right. Well, shall we get into our picks?
Is that how you're asking me? Should I sing something now? Or
I will allow me to rephrase that. I say it's time that we put week 9 in the rear view and focus our attention on week 10, the last week of the regular season. And I say it's time we get picky with it, man.
nah, 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 nah. Gotta pick 'em all. Get picky with it.
All right. Well, starting us off Saturday, April 22nd at noon over on ESPN and ESPN Plus. We have those feisty, resilient Orlando Guardians heading in to St. Louis, the Dome, to take on the 6-3 St. Louis Battlehawks. St. Louis 8.5-point favorites at home. Sounds about right. The Guardians can be stinky poo poo, but they can also put up a fight. It'll be interesting to see what happens. We just discussed all of the tie-breaking scenarios that St. Louis needs to go in their favor, but the biggest one of all is just win. Just win, baby. Just go out there, get the dub over one of the worst teams in the league, and then see what Seattle does on Sunday night. But for now, St. Louis, focus on getting the win, and that is why I'm picking you to get it done, because you need it. You got to have it to have a shot at the playoffs. If you lose, you're probably a goner. So, Hawks over the Guardians. I'm calling it. Tickets are as low as $32. Go fill that stadium up, St. Louis, and make some noise. Who you got, man?
So actually, now that I think about it, if St. Louis loses and Seattle also loses, Seattle still gets the tiebreaker.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Because Seattle will still have the strength of victory because they'll have it by 2 wins.
Right.
Because the only team that they would have beaten that St. Louis hasn't is the Guardians.
Right. Yeah.
So, that being said, I want to do it so bad.
Just do it, man. You gotta do it.
No, we got to make Sunday night more interesting. Give me the Battlehawks. I might root for the Guardians still because I want the Sea Dragons to have the easiest path possible to the playoffs, but I just think the Battlehawks can't be this down 2 weeks in a row, especially at home with that crowd. They got to figure something out this week, and if there's a team to figure it out against, it's those feisty Guardians.
Yeah,
I do think it could be close. It could be another 2-point game like the Guardians have been having the past 3 weeks.
Could be.
But
could be.
I think the St. Louis Battlehawks will figure it out.
Yeah. I like it, man. I like it when we disagree. Hold on.
Well, then I'll pick the Guardians.
Hold on.
Fine,
I was gonna say I spaced out for a second. I thought you did pick the Guardians, but you're picking the Battlehawks, so we're in agreement. No worries there. All right, let's move on. Starting at 3 p.m. over on ABC and ESPN Plus, we have the DC Defenders making their way out to the Alamo Dome in San Antonio to take on the San Antonio Brahmas. And hey, listen, San Antonio, who would have thought that in Week 10 you'd have a shot to make the playoffs with as bad as you have looked throughout most of this season? Sitting with a 3-6 record, you can bump that up to 4-6 and sneak in to face the Houston Roughnecks. But again, we talked about the tie-breaking scenarios. They're not looking good for you, but just win. Just win. All you got to do is just win, and then we'll see what happens on Sunday. So, with all that being said, DC 2.5-point favorites on the road. Tickets as low as $23. Go fill up that stadium, San Antonio. But it won't matter because DC is going to get the win. I'm sticking with the Defenders. Who you got, man?
I don't know. I mean, because DC could be resting guys. That's kind of what I'm thinking about. I'm surprised the line is that low. I'm wondering if it is because either they're resting people or if it's because DC's last 3 games have also been all within 2 points. They lost to Orlando by 1 point, they beat Seattle by 1 point, and then they beat Arlington by 2 points in overtime this week.
Yeah.
That being said, Jack Cohn is back, baby. He's back. And DC's playing their backups. So give me San Antonio Brahmas at home, playoffs at stake. Let's get it done. Let's do it.
So now is where I can say I like the when we disagree.
Yeah.
All right. I like it. I like the spicy picks. Let's move over to Sunday and the most interesting game of the week because I think it is the one that has the most potential for an upset. But we have at 3 p.m. over on ESPN the Houston Roughnecks heading into Arlington to take on the Arlington Renegades. And the most interesting line of the week, in my opinion, Arlington, a 4-5 team, versus Houston, a 6-3 team. The Renegades are 1-point favorites. 1-point favorites, which I get it. You're at home, that adds some points in your favor. But 1-point favorites against the Roughnecks. Ooh, I don't know, man. I don't know how I feel about that line. I like the Roughnecks in this one. I don't know how I feel about the Renegades. I think that if the Brahmas win on Saturday, then I'm with you. I think Arlington will come out swinging, and I like that 1-point line a lot more. But the fact that they get to sit back and see what happens first, if San Antonio falls flat against DC, Arlington doesn't have to do anything. They're already in. This game is essentially meaningless. And so why really put your best foot forward when you're facing them again next week in the South Championship? Why show them anything? Why just, I like your pick of the Brahmas on Saturday because it makes this game a lot more intriguing and interesting. Without San Antonio winning, this game is kind of pointless. But with all that said, I do have to pick a winner, and I'm going with the Roughnecks. I'm going to buck the Vegas odds and pick Houston. Who you got, man?
Yeah, this is probably the toughest game to pick with a lot of how it's going to play being dependent on the Brahmas. And then also the Roughnecks don't have to really play if they don't want to either. They can also rest people if they want. I don't know if they will because it's not like their starters have been great and maybe they want them to get the reps. But you also don't want to show too much to a team you could be potentially playing the next week.
Yeah. Yep.
And Houston, it also depends who they want to play. Do they want to play the Brahmas or do they want to play the Renegades? I don't know. Either way, for things to get spicy, the Roughnecks need to win. So I'm going to pick the Roughnecks.
Okay.
Because
I like it.
The Brahmas getting into the playoffs would be fun. It would be
fun. Would be interesting. I don't know how I feel about it.
I mainly don't want to see Houston versus Arlington 2 weeks in a row because
Fair.
I feel like it's not a good matchup. Or at least the Brahmas and Jack Cohn are more fun.
I mean, I just don't think it's going to be a better game. I think the better game is Arlington versus Houston for the South. Just because San Antonio has been... Like, Arlington has been mid. They've been mid all season. They're the definition of mid. If there ever was a team that defined mid, it's the Arlington Renegades. And the Brahmas have been more bad than good. And so the potential for a blowout is greater with the Brahmas facing the Roughnecks versus the Renegades. So for me, I enjoy playoff football that is good, and so I feel like the chances are higher of seeing that if it's Arlington.
You want to hear a fun fact?
Sure.
As I was doing all the research for tiebreakers this week, one of them was total net touchdowns, right?
Yeah.
Which is a stat you can see on the website.
Yeah.
Out of the 8 teams Guess who are the bottom two in net touchdowns?
The Brahmas and Renegades?
The Brahmas and Renegades.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So sixth, well, tied at fifth, I guess. The Battlehawks and the Vipers both have 23 total touchdowns.
Okay.
The Brahmas and Renegades both have 12 total touchdowns.
Wow.
So it's crazy that these two teams are who's fighting for the playoffs right now
Yeah.
when they have 11 less touchdowns than the people ahead of them.
I mean, I think it just goes to show the defense and the defensive skills that both those teams have to keep themselves in games where they're not scoring. So
Yeah.
you look at like Vegas and Orlando. Like Vegas and Orlando have decent offenses that can score at times, but their defenses are garbage. The defenses can't stop anything. So yeah, that is interesting. So it's a fun little fact.
Yep.
I had fun hearing that fact. Let's move on to the final game of the weekend at 7 p.m. over on ESPN2. We have the Vegas Vipers heading their way up to Seattle to take on the Seattle Sea Dragons. At home, Seattle are 8.5-point favorites. Again, makes sense. The Vipers have been more trash than good for the most part this season. So I think I'm rolling with Seattle on this one. This is a game that, again, kind of relies on the Battlehawks and seeing what they do against the Guardians on Saturday to give a lot more intrigue to this game. If the Battlehawks lose, I think they're out of it at that point. Is that correct? Just going back to the tiebreaking scenarios?
Yeah, the strength of schedule, Sea Dragons would be ahead because they have a win over the Guardians in St. Louis.
So basically, if the Guardians win on Saturday, this game also means nothing. The
correct
Sea Dragons will have clinched already. Yeah, so I hate that it relies on something a day before, but it's fun. And assuming the Battlehawks go out there and take care of business, this game gets a little more intriguing. I still think they're going to beat the pants off the Vipers because the Vipers are not great more times than they are good. So, yeah, give me the Sea Dragons. I'm going to assume, being the leader of the Nooch Express over there, that you're probably going to agree with me. But I got to ask anyways, who you got, man?
Nooch. Yeah. Nooch. Yeah, give me the Sea Dragons. I don't know what I have to say about it. Even if if they don't play their starters, then the game doesn't matter anyway. But if they try even like 10%, then they're gonna beat the Vipers. So give me the Sea Dragons. That was easy.
Yeah. I agree. It's weird to finish on an easy one like that, but that's the way it goes sometimes. So I think we've got an exciting week 10 ahead of us. Again, some very interesting tie-breaking scenarios for both the North and South divisions. And we'll see what happens in the playoffs. Who's going to meet up with Houston in the South and who's going to meet up with DC in the North. Handful of teams out there vying for those last couple spots. So should be a fun weekend of football. As always, we appreciate you tuning in and listening in whatever capacity you are doing so. If you're watching us on YouTube, hey, thanks for checking out the video. Make sure you click that subscribe button for content from us weekly, every week when we post the podcast. We should probably look into getting more content on YouTube, but that's a lot of work, and we all have jobs, and we're in our 30s. Most of us are in our 30s. So
one of us are in the middle of moving.
It's a lot. So maybe bear with us. Maybe eventually we'll have more content, but I'm not promising anything. So, hit that subscribe button at your own your own discretion.
We do have another podcast because XFL is coming to a close. I think we've decided for our sanity that we're not going to also cover USFL.
It's a lot.
But we do have another podcast if you like us, and we have another friend we do it with called Putt Stuff. You can find us on Spotify, can find us on Instagram at PudStuffPod.
Yep.
And when Devin moves down here, we are hoping, because that's a lot easier to do some YouTube content for him, because we can just take our phones to a course and film it. So,
Yeah.
So do that too.
Yeah. That'll be a good time. So be on the lookout for all of that coming soon. But yeah, we also have a Twitter. We don't really use Twitter much. Blake's in charge of the Twitter, so just go yell at him and berate him on Twitter. That's fun. Just do that. I'm gonna beg you to do that. Actually, please go do that. Give him some excitement throughout the day. But yeah, outside of that, we have a Facebook that is pretty inactive. Again, we don't do the social media stuff too well. We're all old. But we appreciate you joining us for the ride that is the XFL season and our coverage of it. So we appreciate it. We love you. We thank you. And hopefully we'll see you next weekend. And as always, that's that.
Good chat.